Okay, gentlemen, good evening and welcome to all three of you to Iblis Manifestations. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. Dayal and Adrian, you've both been on the podcast before. Chris, it's your first time, but first of all, welcome to the podcast. Been a big fan of Schammasch for quite a few years, I think since your second record, Contradiction, which is about 10 years ago now. So...
we're gonna have the 10th year anniversary in April, so just in 2 weeks from now, so pretty much accurate. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing, man, amazing. So very excited to have all four of you gentlemen here, and of course, as everyone has already seen, we are going to be discussing the very relevant topic of AI, particularly the usage of it within arts and the sort of the big waves we've been seeing in the music industry as of late. Perhaps this was expected, but let's try and get into the nitty and gritty and just try and break this down and get everyone's thoughts on it, really. Dayal, I suppose with yourself having been involved in the music scene for so many years, and you've now just released a book, congratulations, by the way. What can you tell us about your thoughts on this? Because you've been quite vocal about this topic.
Yeah, I think it's not a case of being anti-AI per se. The counter argument against AI art is normally that this is something inevitable, and that it's sort of a Luddite perspective to try and challenge that. And I think the nature of extreme metal and underground metal is that you don't accept everything that comes with the normal commercial music industry. It does make, like, from a commercial sense, in the future, it probably will make sense to use AI art. So you can't deny people from that perspective, but the whole nature of underground and extreme metal is that it's kind of counter to commercial currents. And so I think it's I suppose my perspective is, at the moment, it's a matter of it's just bad business to use AI art, because we can see the bands that use it receive backlash. People focus more on the art. You can see this with Pestilence, Deicide, Slayer, or Kerry King, sorry. So right now, I think it's stupid to use AI, because even if you believe AI is a positive thing, it's not at the stage where it's not discernible from the human eye. So at the moment, I think it doesn't make sense for bands or labels especially to use AI, because the merchandise and the CDs and the vinyls you create are not going to be desirable. So even from a kind of commerce point of view, it doesn't make sense. Now, in a few years, I don't believe AI will be easy to detect. I think that will change. And so this will be the difference. At that point, it will become more of a ideological or ethical argument. But I think we're a few years away from that, and I think as long as so my point of view, I guess you asked me to be here partly because we did this anti-AI art meme or post, and that was partly tongue-in-cheek. It was a spoof of the Never Stop the Madness campaign by Roadrunner. We obviously did stop the AI madness. And that was partly tongue-in-cheek, but it was also serious in the sense that I think for bands to use it now is I see a lot of young bands using it because it's free. And I think it's, a terrible decision, because, people won't buy those, just from a practical point of view, people won't want to buy that stuff. And sort of surviving on a monetary basis as a extreme metal band isn't easy these days. And I think if you're going to make designs that people want on merchandise, that people want to buy physicals of, and so on, to use AI art is just ridiculous, because you'll save maybe $200, $300, but you'll make something which nobody wants to buy. Nobody is going to want to have that Kerry King design on their shirt in 5 years, because it looks dated now. So imagine how dated it'll look in 5 years. So I guess my perspective is that it's better to do the same thing that bands have done for the last 40 years, which is to use, you know, even if you use crude imagery or homemade imagery, that stuff has soul and kind of will survive. There's a reason why people still want to have a blaze in the northern sky designs on their t-shirt or on their wall flag or on, to re-buy the vinyl for the 13th time. It's because that's an iconic design that was made for no budget. You don't need a budget to make iconic covers and iconic imagery for black metal. In fact, bands, one of the things that I see on a lot of the posts that we made was the reply would be like, well, we have no money. And it's like, you don't need money to make good designs. If anything, the history of death and black metal and doom metal in terms of aesthetics is that you don't need money to make an iconic design, whether it's a band picture or an old woodcut or whatever you choose to use. There's so many options you can use that will date much better. So from my point of view and from Cold Never Dies' point of view, I think we recognize that AI is an inevitability, but it's not it's still something that people should fight within underground metal culture, because it goes against all the kind of ethics and the raison d'etre of underground metal, and the thing that people don't realize, a lot of bands are quite cocky about this and say, well, I'm going to use it to, and of course, the next step is that musicians are being replaced by AI, and that's that's an interesting question. What happens when the death metal album of the year is made by AI? Does that matter? That's another debate, but it will happen. You can already buy or listen to, even for free on YouTube, AI doom metal albums, AI hip hop albums, AI. We're looking at one specific. The artist is what AI has come for first, but all of this stuff. I was talking to Edmund from Nagura Bunjit and Dordada last week, and his studio operations are threatened by AI because people are using this software and these technological possibilities at home. So this isn't something which is just going to threaten, and looking further beyond. I mean, they say that 30% of jobs will be replaced by AI within the next 15 years. So this is actually a bigger issue. But I guess my point is that, if you're in the motor industry or in the mainstream retail industry, these are probably currents that you can't resist. You probably have to go with the flow. But underground metal, by its definition, is an illogical, irrational world. We choose to make music or support music or release music that is not commercial. So to use the most commercially accessible form of artwork creation, that's a paradox for me. It makes sense to go against the flow in that sense.
This is particularly something that I found disappointing, was seeing even the likes of Hellbutcher using AI arts, and I always, as a big Niflheim fan, I always found them to be sort of, pillars of what underground metal actually is. So I think it's perhaps maybe even more common than we think, and there is an aspect of industrial revolution to it, as you kind of put, with how it's going to affect society. I mean, Adrian, what are your thoughts on the matter, if you want to unpack those?
I mirror a lot of what Dayal said, to be honest. Yeah. There's going to be... So I'm coming into this trying not to kind of come in too emotionally. I'm trying to lay it out in my head. And I was saying to Chris the other day, actually, the more I kind of think about this and discuss it, the more I end up forming my own opinion from my kind of point of view to it. So forgive me if I kind of mumble anything. I'm still working it out in my head. My initial instinct is kill it with fire. It's awful. It's completely inorganic. I'm not against technology generally. I obviously use a lot of it. But when it comes to something that we resonate with as humans, and I'm talking about the music as well as the visual art happens to be being attacked first, as Dayal said, that the music will come after, unfortunately. We, my hope is that there's going to be a group of people that really like hold the organic side of it to heart, and bands as well. And my comparison is now sort of music streaming and buying vinyl, buying tapes, CDs, anything, buying merchandise. There is room for the streaming. It has its own benefits, but it almost filters out a lot of, again, the organic side of why we love what we love. And I'm hoping that the people who appreciate the visual art not only push back, but remember why they fell in love with certain albums because of the cover, why they found certain visual artists, and why they resonated with them. The AI art, there's no human resonation with it. You instantly see it. And even with my like basic knowledge of what goes into it, there's no heart there. There's no connection there. And I can't imagine buying an album that from a band I've loved for years, buy an album and get it in my hands. And you, as everyone, or I imagine most people do, you open it up, you look at all the details, look at the human side of it, either while you're listening or before you listen, and that's going to look like absolute crap. At the minute, there's no way around that. And even if in the future they manage to get past that, you're still going to know, like a lot of bands now, they're happy to admit they've used AI. And it's like, there's no kind of, so either they are naive enough to not realize that the images it's processing is stolen from real life, a lot of real life living artists. They're either naive to not understand that, which, okay, we're still early doors. Maybe you can kind of forgive that to a point, maybe. Or they're completely happy with that, which for me is even worse. And it's like they expect fans to be invested in something they've made, they've created, and essentially sell it to make money to continue doing that. And I can't help but feel like it's an insult to the fans. And look at the outbreak that's, you know, the outcry. That's keeping on top. I mean, I've been trying to keep on top of it as much as I can, but it just goes to show how outspoken people have been, of how dear they hold it at the moment. And I just truly hope that continues.
I understand. Chris, any thoughts?
Well, I pretty much agree on both you guys, but also one point I very much like to mention is, which in my opinion gets forgotten a lot of times when talking about this stuff, even from artists' point of views. I saw on social media the last couple of weeks, is like the bigger picture of what this stuff is going to do on the long term to the whole artist value. Like the whole value of art is basically pretty much under attack by AI technology, because it's going to create such immense floods of people using and generating this stuff on a daily basis. Like you can't imagine right now, because pretty much it only had arrived in visual art so far. But as Dayal said, it's already in music. Like it's footing in music and also in video. Like the other day I saw some apps and also a new platform for video stuff where you can basically pretty much create a whole fucking music video on just like sequences, AI sequences. And imagine like when this stuff has started, the first AI app, I remember when it came up, and I made a fun with a lot of befriended artists about it when it came up, because it was just ridiculous. It was pretty much just a joke. It was like 2 years ago or so. And take the 2 years where it's gotten from a ridiculous stage where you made fun of it to pretty much being a full-blown danger to the whole artist movement in just 2 years. That's nothing. That's no time. And now take another 5 years from now, or take another 10 years, and you don't have to be a fucking psychic to imagine where this is going to go. If everybody can just start using this stuff for no money on a daily basis, putting out, as I said, floods of generated crap, and it's going to lead to a complete devaluation of art in general from the point of society's view. And that is what I'm pretty much afraid of, because as a visual artist myself, not just being a musician, but also a visual artist and a freelancer, I'm not really super anxious about kind of losing my work, not in the past, not in the coming 5 years at least or so. But because, as also Adrian said, like, there's always going to be the people who don't want to have anything to do with this stuff, and who pretty much find it disgusting. And there's always going to be artists who you know, go the typical artist route and are willing to sacrifice for creating and do all the work that needs to be done to create proper art. And those people, from that point of view, I'm not going to lose my job any time soon, I think. But the thing I'm really afraid of is how absurd it's going to be seeing this stuff come to life in the next couple of years, and just generating this fucking tsunami of useless, meaningless void, masked as art. And it's going to lead to, as I said, it's going to make art lose value big time. And it's not like that's not already happening in modern society. Like, in the, I don't know, since social media came up and so much new technology, and just like the past 10 to 20 years, the artist métier has changed a lot, and also a lot for the worse, I would dare say. And it's not like this whole métier is really standing on very on very strong pillars right now. And what this whole AI shit, is gonna do for the artist métier is, yeah, as I said, you don't have to be Nostradamus to imagine where it's gonna lead. And I'm pretty surprised how so many artists don't really talk about that. Like, it's always just like how it looks, or how it steals jobs, how it makes artists useless, or how it's stolen and based on pre-made art from actual artists and all this stuff. But it's never really the actual bigger picture when it comes to the future. I'm never really reading that anywhere, and that's what makes me extra afraid, because fuck, it's something that needs to be talked about, and not just from a visual artist point of view, but also as a musician or any kind of artistic field, like a writer or a video maker, or, yeah, as I said, like, it's gonna attack the whole range of artist creation, and that's pretty much what I'm really afraid of.
I think if I may play the devil's advocate, and the question that I'm asking is not necessarily something that I personally agree with, but one argument that is generally made for this, and it's something that's statistically backed as well, and what really grants the popularity of this particular tool is the convenience. Now, in your case, particularly, I remember from some years ago, I think, seeing like a common thread on Facebook or something, I think, where someone had asked you for a Schammasch CD. They asked you to send you like to send them a free CD or something. And I think I remember you saying something along the lines of, we've just spent 10,000 euros recording this album, going through the heartache and the headache and everything, to make this, I think might have been around the time of Triangle. So I think that the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of times, when that is the kind of pain and the effort that you have to go through to, let's say, make an album, because of course we know that soon enough it'll be coming after music. So what's to say that, like, why wouldn't you want to go after a convenient free tool instead of spending all of that money and spending 2-3 years making an album, spending all the time in the studio and paying for all the equipment and everything? What do you think makes that distinction that in our culture we're leaning towards the inconvenience rather than the convenience?
Because that's pretty much how modern society nowadays functions. It's all about how quickly you can get results, how quickly you can present something towards the outside that makes that, underlines your ego or your importance to the world. It's also how the job, pretty much the everyday life in modern society is all about speed and functioning and ego. So I mean, I guess it's just this whole movement, or this whole what's the right word? Development is pretty much just, to me, a reflection of the zeitgeist of all the stuff that's already happening in modern society anyway, like all the bad stuff, all losing meaning left and right. Our lives are pretty much dominated by consumption and ignorance and unbalance, and working your ass off to have results that you can build your ego on. And yeah, I mean, what the AI technology really brings is very quick results for no money or no effort. And how is that not a reflection of the times we live in? That's pretty much the most accurate reflection there is, really, in my opinion, at least.
Quantity over quality, I guess.
Quantity over quality, and also meaninglessness over meaning, because if you take some random AI thing and then you look at some guy on Instagram who's having like a followership of like couple of 40K or so, which just daily generated one-click pictures that don't mean shit, that don't have any meaning, that there was no emotion attached to a creational process or building up skill, no personal progression, no personal experience, or any of that stuff that really makes art valuable in my eyes. But a lot of those, like, maybe a lot is the wrong word, but I've seen quite a few of those profiles recently, and they seem to be doing pretty well, like much better than my profile is doing. And that, I mean, I guess I might be also a little bit jealous because of that, because it's pissing you off, because obviously social media has become very unpredictable and very, very hard to grow a profile on, or like a followership. And seeing those people with no effort building up their shit with no value whatsoever, it makes you fucking discontent as an artist. I mean, I feel like that, and I'm sure a lot of others do as well. And some might be on a high horse and say like, well, then you might just not be good enough or some shit. But that's a very ignorant point of view, in my opinion.
I think my question is, the thing that I'm trying to come to is also just, well, yes, you're saying that it is successful, but it has no meaning behind it. So what do you think actually like really defines that meaning? Why is it necessary to have a personal touch and to go through difficulty to create a process when you could simply just, like you said, make the same thing at a click?
Well, you can also ask yourself, why live a life if you can just die? Like, right?
Sure.
Because that's going to be the result. And if it's all just about the result, then why even bother with any kind of process or any kind of experience, or or any kind of meaning? Like, what's the meaning anyway? As the old saying goes, the old Buddhist saying goes, like, it's not about the result, but the way to get there. And I don't know, the only value in this kind of art that I just spoken about, like all these Instagram profiles or stuff like that, similar stuff like that, its only value lies in just how do I phrase that properly? Pretty much content that is nice to look at for a second for people that don't have to that don't need to connect anything with it, that just want to look at it and find it nice and then move on within a second. There is no more value in it than that. It's pretty much that. And to me, that's not the value of art. The value of art lies somewhere much deeper.
I think the people that follow those Instagram accounts you mentioned, though, they're used to seeing an image for, like you said, a few seconds and then keep scrolling onto the next image, keep scrolling. And that the AI art kind of tailors to that. And I think I'd rather have lesser followers that follow the kind of work we do, in terms of we put the time and the process into it.
Of course.
Those followers, no matter what their number, they're kind of almost, their brains are wired for the modern way of, I don't even want to say viewing art, because that's an insult to everything that's come before it. But their brains are used to kind of a few seconds, scroll, move on. So I think that's probably why there's been a blow up of the online accounts, because it's quick and easy. It's fast food for your eyes, basically.
Exactly. And also it takes no time. And that's one of the big things. Like, if you want to be successful on Instagram, for example, as an artist, then you have to have a fucking gigantic output, like pretty much maybe on a daily basis. I don't know, maybe on a 2 days basis or something, like putting out something new every day or every second day, or even just twice a week or so, is a lot. It's
the guidelines. The guidelines, I think, are like 3 posts a day. If you don't do that, you start losing followers. Because I tried it for a few weeks. I was like, I know it's not sustainable. I can't keep that up.
It's not fucking human, and that's the point. Like, the only way to really get there as an artist when it comes in, when it's in terms of output, then go ahead and do AI stuff every day and see how much satisfaction that's going to bring you as a person.
Because how many of them followers are paying you for the AI work? Probably not many of them. They're just in it just to see it and keep scrolling.
Exactly, but also they're in it. The people who do this stuff, they're in it to build up their ego on the illusion that they're creating something that has value, and that illusion is going to be underlined by a couple of 20,000 followers, which are going to tell them on a daily basis how great their stuff is, which is pretty much just a prompt put into Discord server, and that's it. So
I think there's I think there's actually a really interesting point there, and I'd like to unpack that. Just to take a couple of steps back, actually, I really like what Adrian said, is that people are like looking at something and then, they just quickly scroll past. I think there's definitely something to that shortened attention span. Because whenever Adrian posts something, I always grab my phone and I kind of like zoom in, so make sure I really see the details, And even then, I know that I'm not really getting the full thing. But I think that there's something to that, because I guess one of the biggest issues that when it comes to this topic that people are discussing is the fact that, as Chris put it, I think it's that kind of false sense of security that you have achieved something because you clicked. And then meanwhile, whether it's a musician or whether it's a designer, whatever it is, you haven't actually gone and practiced your craft. So you don't know how to play guitar a certain way, or you don't know how to do blast beats, or if it's in the case of design, you could barely fill out a coloring book, and then yet here you are, posting these really intricate designs out there. And I think perhaps there's a deeper underlying societal aspect to this as well, and it's that there's something there that's just making us lazier and more dependent as human beings in general. I mean, the older generation won't even look at Google Maps because they believe in finding their own way, and looking at paper maps or just asking for directions. And I think there's something there where, because we're so in the middle of it, perhaps the change isn't as evident or as obvious, but you could almost say that we're perhaps somehow cocooned into becoming entirely reliant on AI, and perhaps that is the future of humanity. I mean, I don't know if you guys wanted to unpack that. Dayal, you've been quiet for a moment, so I don't know if you wanna chime in. If you guys wanna just grab the ball and run with that one, please go for it.
I mean, AI is a blanket term, and obviously, some of the stuff that we're talking about and describing as AI, it's not AI. It's algorithms that are. It's algorithms. It's not actual AI. But the argument. Obviously, we're all quite old by the standards of the people who are maybe inspired by AI. I think the argument is that for an 18-year-old kid, they would see this discussion and they would think that we're kind of self-handicapping ourselves by not using a tool. AI is a tool, and the problem is it's such a great tool that it kind of seduces us, and that's the challenge, really, is that because I think the problem is that what we're objecting to is, I guess, people who are using AI to generate a finished product. So you use AI or algorithms, you use Midjourney, you generate an album cover. It's very quick. You save, in the short term, you save some money. The designer gives it to the band likes it, it becomes the album cover. But probably where AI is going to be used in a way that none of us would be able to detect so easily is that people will use AI to come up with ideas. And maybe that's a more defendable use of AI, is that you would use AI to generate. So let's say someone wanted to make a cover for Deicide. They use AI, it comes up with this devil face, and then they say, okay, I'm going to paint that myself.
Sorry if I'm interrupting you, but that's an interesting example, actually, because that's pretty much exactly what happened to me when a band last year contacted me. Because I'm just going to bring that up real quick and then I'll let you finish. But they came to me with some Midjourney images they created themselves, because the artist, famous oil painter that they used to book for artworks, had died just a couple of months before. And they wanted to continue in that same style, so they came to me with those images and asked me if I can do something like that. And I was pretty conflicted about it, actually, because I didn't really know how to react to it, and I ended up doing pretty much recreating one of the AI images on a 3D basis and then overpainting it digitally, so it would give it that oil paint look, and it turned out pretty nice, and I'm pretty happy about it. But I felt very conflicted about doing this because there was no real creative process for me to develop an idea on my own, or like something was lacking, and I'm not sure how to react when that happens again, or it might happen again at some point, and not really sure what to do about it. But yeah, it's an interesting.
That will become most likely the future, I think. And the bigger issue is, of course, that bands can now use AI to come up with riffs, and then you play them yourself. I mean, I'm guessing none of you listen to Drake, but if you're into Drake, someone came up about a year ago with a fake Drake, and they
I heard
created this song, which was a AI version of a Drake song, and the hip hop press, a lot of writers in the hip hop scene, rightly said this is one of the better Drake songs to come out in the last year. And so his team of 3 songwriters, he does his lyrics, I think, but his team of 3 songwriters hadn't come up with a tune that was as catchy as. Now, of course, the vocals were done by an AI pretending to be Drake. But if the person that had generated that song, instead of releasing it to make a point, here's fake Drake, it wasn't hidden. But if one of his songwriters had done that, it comes up with the melody lines, and then he says to Drake, you record this, and then nobody can do an AI test and tell. This is what I think, unfortunately or fortunately, is probably the future for creative endeavors within human kind, is that if I want to make if Metallica want to make a good Metallica song, they feed the AI their best 4 albums. The AI generates some riffs. Now, if they put that straight out, you can run software to tell this is AI, but they just get the band to cover it. So Napalm Records has an AI band, and they've made a point of it. It's got AI videos. It's all fictional. It's kind of like Gorillaz for Amon Amarth fans. And it has a fictional band playing AI generated songs, but that's their selling point. They've made they're not just admitting it, they're making a point. This is all AI generated music. But what you'll see in the next, I know there's already artists who use this, not to name any names, and I know there's dungeon synth artists who can make an entire album using AI, because it's very that sort of music fits very easily within generating AI music. Same within house music. There's AI house tracks and drum and bass tracks that are quite good, that have been generated by AI. So I think, we won't be able to tell soon, because if you're clever, the cheap way is to do what Pestilence do. You make an AI image, everyone can tell it's AI, and you put it up and everyone takes the piss out of you. But the smart thing, the way that people will use this moving forward, is they'll use AI to generate the base image or the base song or the base film, and then you'll do something on top of it. If you want to make an advert and you want to have animation, you can generate that with AI, but if you have the budget, you'll then probably pay a human artist to kind of disguise it and make it human again. And I think, unfortunately, I'm not sure if I don't think that's really easy to resist. I mean, even, I'm a writer, and when I write something on Microsoft, it comes up with its automatic, suggestions for grammar. And I mean, that's AI, or at least an algorithm. And if it comes up with a better phrasing, anyone who uses Word or even Google Mail, it comes up with suggestions, and sometimes you think, oh, that is a better way of phrasing that. You've used AI, essentially. These are tools but nobody would know if I changed a sentence due to Word suggesting that. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's really possible to that extent. Maybe it's a bit inevitable that because there's already, if you're using patches and if you're making music, even the last 10 years, you can make music, and the music software is essentially doing what Word is doing. It's suggesting you arpeggio. For example, you have guitar effects where you play one note and it plays an arpeggio. To some extent, that's the same thing. It's not AI, but you're generating stuff in a sort of artificial way. Now, you then learn to play that arpeggio, and that's how you record the record or whatever. And I think that's maybe how AI will be used in a way that we won't be able to really determine. You know, the stuff we're seeing now is so crude. I think people will laugh at it in 3 to 5 years because the technology is moving so quickly. So people will look at, for example, that Deicide cover, the Pestilence art. What's the other band? It's Hour of Penance. All this stuff, you know, it will look at it the same way as we look at those terrible Photoshop covers from the mid-90s, where people just sticking every layer that they could onto the file and using opacity 50, and you know that was really groundbreaking, but it looked terrible. So I think the stuff you're seeing now, people will laugh at, but I think that realistically, if I was going to write a film script, you know, in 5 years, I mean, I'm not involved in film, so that's why I chose that, but I could use an AI to generate a sci-fi script. Now, the stupid thing to do would then be just to submit the script. But if I went to it as a writer and then improved on it, and then it's not detectable that it's been generated initially by AI, nobody can point to that. And also it's generating ideas quickly, and everyone now needs, you know, in a sort of consumerist capitalist machine, you know, it's about, as you say, like when you're talking about social media, it's about how fast you can generate stuff. My suspicion is that most of us will be using these algorithms and AI as a tool to generate ideas or to help us, you know, along the way. I'm not sure if that is I think it'll be quite rare. It's not rare in 2024 for us to be saying we don't want to use those tools. I think what it will be rare in 2034, you know, or even 2030. I think some of this stuff will become so everyday. And so I think that side of AI is perhaps hard to pose, really. I mean, there'll always be people, and this is kind of what I go back to. We're having this discussion within a very specific niche, and that's, let's say, underground art and music culture, or something, you know, to put it crudely. But maybe this is one arena where people will stay truer to the old methods out of a sort of commendable stubbornness, in a sense. You know, there's a reason why, like, none of us do what we do because we want to get rich, because if we wanted to get rich, we'd be in a different industry. We all do it because we feel it. And so I think people within our scene, you know, underground art, underground music, underground writing, we probably will stick to the old ways because we wouldn't feel fulfilled creating something which was mostly done by a machine. But what we're doing is always going to be niche, and is always going to be the adversary to what's going on in the mainstream. And I think you'll see industries like pop and rock and hip hop, these industries will grasp these tools, because if you want to make money if I wanted to make money out of rock music, you know, in the next 10 years, probably I would get a bunch of young, good-looking musicians and, you know, use AI to write them plenty of songs, choose the best ones, make a few tweaks, get them to cover it, and off you go. You know, it's an easy way to do stuff. So I think
sounds so fucking horrible, though.
Yeah, but that's the. Is it?
Of course,
I don't know if it's that different to the pop or the mainstream machine.
I'm going to say it sounds like pop music as it is now. Just rinse and repeat, give it 5-10 years, then you're on to the next artist. It'll be the same as that.
Although I gotta disagree on that. There's all in every niche. I mean, in every métier, might it be music or art or whatever. There's always the good stuff and the bad stuff, and even in pop music, there's a lot of good stuff that doesn't go that very stupid easy route.
But my suspicion is some of the good stuff will be written by AI. I think that's the problem, is that some of the good stuff that's going to come out in 5 years will be made by a computer. And I suppose it becomes an ideological issue, because I believe I think in 5 years you could have the best technical death metal album of the year written by AI. Does it matter? You know what I mean? Like, then that becomes the question. I think, you know, we could have a Meshuggah album written. There's already like technical death metal albums and black metal written by AI on YouTube. And again, it's at the Pestilence cover Deicide cover stage where it looks, it sounds kind of crude and it's not quite there. But I think in 5 years, the best album of the year might be made by a machine, and we wouldn't know it because if I wanted to start a black metal band tomorrow, I get the AI to write the songs, then I tweak it a bit. No one's going to know. No one's going to know.
Could be the third necrophagist.
Exactly. But seriously, like when it gets to the point where this stuff is generated without, to the standard of human artists, I don't, it'd be lovely to say that like it won't have the soul and it won't have the feeling of human-made art, but I think that's grossly optimistic. I think that AI and algorithms are so impressive and so clever. I mean, this is the problem. I don't disrespect AI or the technology. The problem is it's too good. The problem is this stuff is so powerful and so fantastic that it kind of devalues art. It devalues what it is to be a human. It devalues all these things. But I do think you will see computers winning art exhibitions. You'll see computers.
That already happened, actually.
Right.
Already happened.
But we know about it because it was revealed. But I think it'll happen in a more nefarious way, in that people will use AI and algorithms to create fantastic art, fantastic music, fantastic film. And then it'll be up to that person whether they reveal that. And I suspect most won't reveal that. That will become, every day. In the same way that so many writers now use Grammarly, which is Grammarly is a more advanced version of spell check, I guess. It gives you can write with it. It's an app, and it suggests you better ways to phrase whatever you've written. A lot of content creators online now use Grammarly to essentially write their articles because it's quick and they can churn it out. And students use it to write their thesis because it can capitulate, it can bring points together in a much more eloquent way and so on. And I just think that's how we'll see it. Unfortunately, it won't be a case of AI versus human. It'll be sort of the human, to what degree the human is using the AI and whether you can tell that apart. And I think the danger is that you won't be able to tell that because it can emulate everything that a human can do.
The dangerous thing is, I think there's always going to be certain people who are on. There's a spectrum of people who are fully against it. There's people who are open to what it can do, how it can help us, and then there's the other end of the spectrum where people are using it for everything, and like you say, maybe not declaring that they've used help and kind of taking all the glory. There's going to be such a spectrum of the moral kind of input of people using this. That's, I think, what's, for me, the dangerous bottom line is not just that people are using it, it's how people are using it. And if that goes into, if they ever get asked about the process, like you say, if they declare that they've used this, they've used that. And I think some people are going to kind of expect that. And if they get a full explanation, they can kind of go, fair enough. Or if they, I think humans have got a generally a good bullshit sensor that if they see a final product and they get even a whiff of someone kind of covering something up, that's going to be an interesting kind of process to see as well.
My suspicion though is that people will stop asking. I think people will ask
also
for the
that
5-10 years.
Yeah, unfortunately so. But right, I think those are the people who are happy to let it all in and just kind of fall backwards into it and just let whatever be, which I think there's some kind of give and take there in terms of, yeah, we certainly can't stop it and we don't need to stop it 100%, but we also have to be very conscious of how we're using it generally. And I don't just mean as an artist, I mean for anyone using any of the examples you gave, it's going to be their own interpretation of how they use that to benefit them. And then, like I said, there's going to be all kinds of different people using it for all sorts, and then we just hope that they're as clear as we need them to be, really.
I think that one thing that I'd also like to get into is that, of course, we've all talked about how it's potentially dangerous, and that it almost, I mean, at this point seems inevitable that it's going to take over. Perhaps one of the last places of resistance against it will be within the underground metal culture, but that in itself, which is the thing that we've always considered so rebellious, is kind of a place that I guess even people within the underground metal can be infected and corrupted, And I have my own thoughts about it, especially, as to how certain people who always claim to be rebellious behaved, especially in the last few years, you could say. But to kind of bring that around, just to how it affects artists directly. I mean, Adrian, for yourself, as someone who does this full time, and you and I have talked about the process of creativity, what it's like to be a part of that, and just the effort it takes to actually remain, I guess, creatively healthy is the best term I can think of at the moment. I mean, of course, the same applies to Chris as well with SAROS Collective, but just for you, I mean, how does this affect not just your profession, but your life in general, with the fact that you are actually a designer by trade?
At the moment, it hasn't affected it at all, touch wood. In terms of maybe mentally, the last thing I need is to get bogged down in arguing, defending anything that's going to potentially take away me from my work. I need to kind of, like I said right at the beginning, I'm still kind of forming opinions. And I love that we've got this opportunity to kind of discuss things. But tomorrow I'm back at my desk with the pens and the paper. And for me, that's the most important thing. Like I said to Chris either yesterday or a few days ago, we can use whatever frustration, whatever views we have within our work. Like, I don't mean in terms of we have to try harder to be better because AI is going to be better. I'm not too concerned about that. Because I know artists similar to myself, they put the work in, and like you said, the human process. And I think that's a key ingredient that we have, whether we kind of realize it sometimes or not. In terms of me feeling like I see some kind of, you're taking jobs away from artists. I'm not really feeling that, to be honest, because
That is happening already. I mean, I know specific examples of labels that have used AI where they would have previously paid 300 euros to a visual artist.
I think what Adrian means is like the people who would commission a piece of him wouldn't be the people who would use AI really. Like, or said the other way around, it's not his clientele nor mine, I hope, that would be, affected by this.
To use an example within Cold Never Dies, for example, our in-house artist, or one of our in-house artists, is David Fiera, the French painter and drawer artist, visual artist. And I've already seen jobs from clients that would have commissioned him, and they've used, and not just him, other artists as well, but just as one example of somebody that I pay to create art for me. I see peers of mine who are using AI because it's a cheaper option.
So for me, there's no difference with that from someone choosing to use another artist who does similar artwork to me instead of me. It's just that's just part of the business, as bands choose to release music with different labels. They choose their own way. For me, that's all part of this kind of same pot, whether AI is included or not. Unfortunately, I'd rather a band go to another human illustrated artist than AI, but that's just me. It's there right at the end of the day. The one thing that's kind of the thorn in my side is, at the moment, I've no doubt things will change in time, but going back to the living artist's work being taken without consent for the AI images. For me, that's the kind of cherry on top that we need to rectify. And
yeah, and this may be something we haven't discussed, is that I think a lot of people use AI, they don't understand that that's where the images come from. And I think that's part of the problem, is that a lot of people aren't really educated on this stuff. So they say, well, what harm is it if we use AI? It's and maybe that's something where people need better educating, is that these images don't come from nowhere. They've been trained on real artists against their will. And, you know, there may be we may see legal developments where some of this stuff, I think Italy has made some legislation against AI works trained on real artists or live-in artists. And
I think that's a part of the thing that a lot of artists who I know have also been coming out and saying, is that essentially, because of the fact that it simply uses pre-existing database created by real artists and humans, that it's essentially a tool of plagiarism.
Yeah, I mean, somebody said it's very good marketing.
No way to regulate that.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
there's no stopping that anymore. Like, that's happened already, and the databases are trained, and yeah, I mean, of course you can take legal action and stuff, but yeah, I mean, this ship has sailed already.
So what would you say, what can we do about this? Because to us, the thing that matters the most is, if I may make a presumption, is the preservation of heavy metal or underground culture, or a step bigger is just art, period. It's just the preservation of that, and I guess the preservation of humanity and our emotions and what makes us what we are. So what can we do at this present time when there is such a thing, you know, that supposedly is a threat to that?
It's down to the individual, I think, whether that's a label manager, a band member taking the art direction. It comes on the individual to kind of, if they choose the AI route, look into it and make sure it's not going to come back to haunt them in 5-10 years' time. As we've seen with the bands who've kind of clearly not looked into it, released the album artwork, got the backlash, changed it. I feel like they could have saved that by actually literally just sitting down and kind of looking into it and seeing what they're actually investing in. And at the moment, I don't really see any other fix than that, other than just being self-aware as a band, as a label, of, as I say, what you're investing in, what you're putting out. Is kind of, they're looking beyond what am I trying to say? I feel like they're happy to cut corners and they're not really worried about the comeback.
I mean, labels will
when it happens.
That's the thing. Labels will cut corners, and I think a lot of the bands involved, I'm sure that Kerry King and Dayal didn't really have an opinion either way. I suspect they were presented that arc. They said, "Oh, that's cool. It's a devil." Yes. Yeah, stick it on there.
That's another good point, though, actually, because I'm not always sure how many bands really. If you there was the example of Niflheim before. I'm pretty sure the guys in Niflheim don't give a shit and have no clue about this technology, and they got it presented from some artist and they didn't know about it. And that's another point of view that always has to be considered, that not every musician necessarily knows that the art that is presented to them is made with AI yet. I mean, that's probably going to change for the better in the future, because more people are going to be a lot more aware of it. But so far, I can imagine that a lot of the times some designer just, put some AI stuff in front of the artist, in front of the musician, and the musician has no clue about it. So, yeah.
If that, because there's a lot of bands that I've interviewed, they didn't even look at their artwork. The label decided it. Unfortunately, some bands musicians don't care about artwork.
That's fucking horrible.
That's insane. That boggles my mind.
Some bands don't care. I mean, speaking frankly, I've spoken to bands where I said, like, what made you choose that cover? They said, "Oh, we make the music. We hand it. I trust the label to choose something good. I won't name, but I could name 3 big bands, very good bands who don't take any part in the visual process. I've interviewed them and asked them, what made you choose that cover? They don't choose the cover. They create the album, they care about it, they make the music as good as it can be, and then they trust the label or the manager or someone else."
That's so fucking alien to me, considering that every single thing that we make, with whether it's with the Trivax albums or whether it's with merch, I have to always specifically commission it, because the point of it is to get that idea, put on paper. And obviously with the with Iloa Burns Out, for example, that we released together, that was all dotted work done by an Indonesian artist on a fairly small piece of paper, and that's kind of the magic of it, it's knowing that there's a human being there and their brainwaves are literally feeding every single tap of the pen on the paper, and that's when it feels alive. And for bands to not even know what the artwork looks like, that couldn't sound any more fucking alien to me, I'm sure they're very good bands, but yeah, that's just like talking a different language to me, really.
I think the thing there is that also needs to be considered that none of us are really on even close to being on a, let's call it, level where some of these bands are operating on, whereas so much business aspects there are to be considered that we cannot fathom, because I mean, it's like comparing a small firm, a small company, to like some gigantic worldwide company chain. They have a lot of different issues on a daily basis, and I guess I'm trying to say, like, for us that's completely alien not to know what your artwork's gonna look like from your album. But I guess for bands like fucking Judas Priest or so, who have been around for a couple of decades, I guess it's a different point of view, and things function on a very different level, which is not an excuse at all, but I'm just saying it definitely has to be considered that it's just like a different sphere, really.
I don't think Kerry King is losing sleep over what his album cover looks like.
But actually, the Kerry King thing, I actually saw the artist that made that one was the guy who made the last Slayer artwork, I think. And that was, yeah, so someone sent me a creation process video of how he made this Kerry King artwork, and apparently it's not AI, and he sketched it out and stuff, and then kind of created some parts in 3D and overpainted it and blah blah. Looked legit to me. It doesn't change the fact that it's pretty fucking horrible, but
I mean, that's another problem. The artists will be accused of using AI when they haven't.
Exactly, yeah.
That will be, I suppose, in a sort of insidious. I mean, that's the real problem when you see photos now online. You see a photo on Instagram or Facebook or on the news, you now have to question: is it real?
Yeah.
Every day I see ridiculous AI images with lots of retired people saying, "Oh, what a beautiful sandcastle you made," or "what a beautiful city this is," and it's very clearly AI, and they're not literate to that.
One thing that you used to see, maybe this is an inappropriate example, but fuck it anyway, because I remember years ago, I don't know if this is still the same, because I stopped watching porn like 2 years ago, but when you would go on porn websites, you would always have like different animations of like Family Guy or Simpsons, and then they were like fucking each other, but then it's like, now they could do it back then because it was animation. Now you don't even need that. Now you could literally make that and make it look realistic. I mean, what was all the stuff that came out with, like,
the hands would be off.
Sure.
But I think that was that's one of the few things that legislators are worried about, is that you could now make a porn video with Scarlett Johansson or whoever. So
exactly,
these are people,
or other stuff that we don't want to speak about, really. Like, yeah.
But I mean, that's the you asked earlier about what can we do. I suppose my argument would be, what we can do is to make it uncomfortable, or to make it clear that it's not part of metal's or underground metal's values, because that's the only battle you can win. You can't fight technology on its own terms. AI is like every other technology, it's the path of least resistance. So anyone who cares about doing things in an easy way, or purely for monetary value, or you can't win any of those arguments, because AI is the answer to all that. The one thing it isn't the answer to is to do something with maybe a deeper value, or kind
history.
History, ethics, all this stuff. And I think it's the same argument that it's impractical to oppose AI is impractical. Right now it's not, because AI isn't quite sophisticated enough, but very soon it'll be impractical to not support AI. And so the thing that I see on my posts, people say basically, it doesn't make sense, you go the easy route, etc., etc. But all extreme metal, or at least underground metal, is impractical, because if we wanted to make more money, we would make hip hop or pop music or whatever. The very act of being involved in underground music, metal, you're doing it for something beyond that. And so I think when you ask what can we do, I think it's to make it clear that it's another way of selling out, to use a crude sort of a glib term or whatever, but it's to put it on that level, really, in the same way as an extreme artist or an extreme band could soften what they do to get a wider audience. That would be the path of least resistance. That would be the logical thing to do. If your goal was greater popularity or greater monetary reward, but we don't, you don't do that. You don't ask Beherit to make an album that sounds like Green Day. So it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, the easier option is, of course, use an AI. It's cheap. It makes something that looks, at least from a superficial level, it looks impressive. But it's the same thing as asking Beherit to sound like Green Day. It's a form of kind of selling your soul and sort of not supporting the values that keep this underground culture alive.
But that's one of the points that I meant earlier when I talked about the devaluation of art through AI technology. It's like people won't stop at like an underground label. People, like, there are so many examples of black metal bands that are using all the black metal, like the typical underground black metal elements, but they are kind of, putting it into a very commercial kind of environment in every way. And I feel like the more AI happens, the more of that phenomenon is going to happen as well. And it's just going to also, it's also going to kind of take a lot of meaning out of that underground term, in my opinion.
And I think if people are aware of that, then a certain number of them will oppose it.
Of course.
I think some people are just not aware of it. We all have a reason to be very hyper aware of this phenomena, but I think there's some people who genuinely just they haven't engaged in this thought process, and so on the face of it, it's like AI, yeah, that looks cool, those images look cool, why what's the problem? And I think that's what we can do, is to point out the problem, in the same way as when you first get into black metal, you might think, what's the problem with having a super commercial sound or a super commercial production or whatever? It's about I think letting people understand, or maybe pointing out that this stuff is diluting the art form, or diluting the spiritual basis behind black metal, death metal, whatever. And then people make their own decisions, and I think a certain amount of them will understand where we're coming from. Some of them won't care, but at the moment it's like that conversation's not really being had for people who are just listening to. Maybe they're not involved in the scene, they're not in a band, they're not in a label, they're not artists, they're not in a publishing house, whatever. They just listen to black metal, they like black metal, they listen to doom metal, whatever, go to the gigs. This stuff they may not be aware of this level, that there's this level of debate to be had.
I think underground metal's probably one of the few genres that you can't really get away with sugarcoating any of your product, whether it's the music, the album art, the live show, everything. Like, as soon as you try and sugarcoat anything, polish it, round its edges, people are going to pick up on that. And I think that's kind of like what we mentioned, Dale, about kind of people recognizing that. And I've no doubt there'll be other underground versions of other genres that I'm not kind of involved with. But there's that kind of that lower level where as soon as you sugarcoat anything, people are instantly like, not for me, no. And then you go off band or whatever. And I think the more certain bands try and do that, they're going to see the results of either a change in fan base or a rejection from their usual fan base. They're going to almost instantly see, because online's so instant now, they're going to instantly see the kind of reaction, and then they have to morally kind of roll with that or make fixes or consider future releases, future process, everything.
And that's the bit I'm optimistic about. I think the world we're in has a chance of consciously rejecting this stuff.
You're not getting swept away with it, I think.
And I think that's the main reason, gentlemen, exactly why I wanted to have this conversation and this discussion with all three of you, is because that I think that online people see opinions left and right from artists or from different people, but there's not much that really engages their thought as to, well, why is this a bad thing? Or why is this something that we should have an issue with? And I think that we've presented some great arguments here. And I think that, at the end of the day, like we said earlier, it's down to the individual to decide for themselves the right and wrong of the matter, and I think that there's plenty of room here for us all to, basically be able to think and see what we're going to do about the preservation of not just our culture, but I suppose also our humanity. Chris, Dayal, Adrian, guys, thank you all very fucking much for joining me on this episode of the podcast. It has been a real blast. And you know what? It's been eye-opening because I've had my own opinions on the matter, but it's been great hearing your guys' opinions on this as well. And I do very much appreciate all your time here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Amazing. And to everyone listening to the podcast as well, hope this has been a thought-provoking conversation for you guys. And we'll see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations.